New week in the call up, and normally we'll talk about promotions, which we have a bunch of, and performers. That's going to wait. We're going to do that tomorrow on Monday, the 9th. Here. We are going to talk about the draftees of 2024. We've been wanting to check in. We wanted to do that maybe at the end of last week. Decided to do it early this week, start off the week with a check-in on Travis Bazzana, Charlie Condon, Nick Kurtz, Hagen Smith, etc. And I think it's a perfect time to kind of do that because some players have had their seasons cut short, unfortunately, by injuries. We're going to talk about that with Kurtz and Christian Moore, unfortunately. But also, you're seeing some players now hit their next level, maybe that were started in low A and now are in high A, and how they're adjusting there. Some pitchers that we weren't sure if we were going to see now have been able to see them throw a little bit, and everything in between. And of course, just wanted to give you updates on maybe players that, if you were planning to do your own check-in, haven't played yet or are in that bridge league. So want to provide that context as well. We're just going to do the first rounders today, but we'll be doing a lot more check-ins on the rest of the draft throughout the offseason as well. And of course, as we were getting ready to do this episode, Jack, it feels like this weekend we got a lot more promotions that came across, and some big names that are getting moved up. So excited for the next episode to talk about Walker Jenkins, Jackson Jobe, and some
Right.
of the top prospects in baseball who are moving on up.
Top prospects in baseball, including Billy Cook with the Pittsburgh Pirates, who got
Oh
up first.
yeah,
Yeah,
Showtime.
2-run double. How about that in his first big league plate appearance? But yeah, man, like it's fun. And now we're getting into the postseason too, and you've got high A postseason games starting. I saw Tugboat gets a start in Dayton, game one on Tuesday. You're getting a 4-pod week this week. The plan right now is this draft update today on Monday. It's promotions performers tomorrow, a mailbag Thursday, and then White Sox top prospects on Friday, which I am going to sit out of, and I'm very excited to sit out of that.
Yeah, we'll have our guy who's done an amazing job on the social side, Elijah Evans, on that episode. He's been helping me with those write-ups throughout this week. And I mean, he does incredible stuff for Future Sox. Nobody's
Mhm.
more tapped into, I think, the White Sox farm system than Elijah. So that's going to be a fun conversation going through each of those rankings that, we're going to put our heads together and figure out exactly how we want to stack them up. A couple players that I might try to talk him down on. I know a couple that he's going to try to upsell me on, but I know overall, there, in terms of the intricacies, he knows everything that's going on with every single prospect in that system. So it's going to be fun. And I think a really detailed breakdown on that White Sox system to wrap up the week. But we're talking about the draft and how
Mhm.
these guys have done so far. And I would say mostly it's a 25, 30 game sample. You don't want to draw too much from it, but I also think it's an opportunity to either adjust some of your preconceived notions of how you may have thought a player would look in pro ball, or some of the concerns. Maybe I think through 100 at bats here, you could start
Yeah.
to have some of those concerns validated as well, and say, okay, is how fixable does this look? How much of an issue do we think this could be in pro ball? And you'll see, and I think you can kind of expect which of those players that conversation will be part of. But I don't think when it comes to maybe overcoming concerns, or trying to totally spell certain narratives. You can't really do that in 30 games, but we tried
No.
to take the time, and I mean, Jack saw the Google Doc that I shared with him. Like, I have bullet points on all these players. I was watching video just to make sure that, I could see if anything mechanically looked different, or, just how some of those, and comparing to our draft write-ups as well, how some of those takeaways may be similar, or, again, may have added to some of the concerns I already had about these guys as an amateur, or vice versa. Are they leaning into some of the strengths that I was excited about when they were getting ready to make their pro debut, which kind of leads us off right away with Travis Bazzana, who went 1-1 to the Guardians.
No doubt, man. I will say, if anybody has a takeaway on a single pitcher at this point, you're wrong. You can't have a takeaway on a
Yeah.
pitcher from the
I,
draft at
I was
this
going to say
point.
that's impossible. You can't have a pitcher takeaway. That is
That's
valid.
impossible. Hey, Caminiti looks like a top 100 prospect in baseball. He's thrown 3 innings. Let's pump the brakes here just a little bit. But Bazzana, we've gotten 101 ABs from, and Travis Bazzana at this point is slashing 238, 369, 396. The 369 OBP does not jump out. The 396 slug does not jump out. I was sort of kind of expecting him to hang out in those areas.
Yeah.
For me, as outdated as this sounds, 238. Bazzana's hitting 238? Like, really? What's going on here?
Yeah, I don't think much. I think it's kind of been run of the mill, what you'd expect. Maybe, of course, slightly less. Anytime you see the number one pick, you want to see them light it up right away. But also, this was a guy that did not even get those get your feet wet stat booster low A games, right? Where we had a
Right.
couple other players that get those 2, 3, 4 low A games. They get 7 hits in those games. And then, when we're working with 130 at bats or 120 at bat sample sizes, that could be the difference of that 238 and maybe a 270, 280. So I really think it was just the one thing I'm seeing with Bazzana is just getting adjusted to higher quality break and stuff. And that's the trend with some of these guys that have this similar move, which is that early hold it, slow building leg kick. And, I love those types of moves for hitters that can control that because it allows you to see the ball early. And it also, I think, gets your lower half very involved. And that's why Bazzana, trying to maximize his body, that was a move that he really has honed in on in his time with Driveline and just working on maximizing every ounce of his power. So the one thing with that though is when you're starting early and you're getting into that backside early, you really got to hold it. Bazzana's proven that he can hold it, but it's harder to hold it when you're seeing higher quality spin because it's sharper, it breaks later, and it can just kind of get you a little bit more. That's the only thing I've seen where it's just at times he's a little bit on his front foot against sliders. It's just still just adjusting to
Yeah.
professional sliders, high A sliders. And what I've noticed as well is across these draftees, like low A sliders are just not nearly as good as the high A sliders, like in particular the sliders. So he's already looked better in that regard. He's been all over fastballs. He's flashed the power to the pull side. We already saw him hit a ball, 109 off the bat, 400 feet, which is more than enough juice from him with wood. The patience is there. He hedges any concern, even if there is a bit more of a learning curve with the breaking balls, hedges that with great swing decisions. And I think he's already looked better and better and better against the secondary stuff. But, there was a little stretch against Peoria where I think he went like 0 for 12, 0 for 13. Saw some good arms in that stretch. And, all of a sudden your average drops real quick when we're
Yeah.
dealing with small sample sizes here. So I think that's all it really is. And, I think overall it's been pretty impressive and kind of what you'd expect from Travis Bazzana in his pro debut.
It's funny because with Cruz now up, and we're looking at Skeens, Cruz, Langford all up in the major leagues from that 2023 draft. I think we assume that the top three picks in the draft are just going to fly at warp speed because we constantly talk about how high a level college baseball is at now. Has this altered your timeline at all subconsciously for Bazzana? Because part of me, like, I'll be honest, part of me in the back of my mind was saying, okay, this guy's going to have a 1200 OPS in high A across 30 games, and then he's going to get the bump to double, and then he's going to be in Columbus to start 2021. And by June 15, he's going to be a Cleveland Guardian. Now I'm like, Jack, you moron, pump the brakes for a minute, please.
That's an excellent question because I think it's a really important context to provide here. This is not the draft that it was a year ago.
Right.
Travis Bazzana, as impressive as he was, is not going in the top two picks in last year's draft. He's probably not going in the top three.
Right.
So there's a big difference in what those guys were doing last year and what they're capable of doing, right? And even Dylan Cruz had that slight learning curve in terms of adjusting to the sliders and things like that. But again,
It only took him a year to get
yeah,
through minor league baseball.
and where he's at, his capabilities, he's just a better ball player, in
Right.
my opinion. But yeah, that is a great point. I think it is a reminder that last year's draft is really, really freaking good. And while these
Yeah.
guys are going to be on faster timelines than we've been accustomed to 5 years ago, or even maybe 4 years ago, uh, this is not going to be a duplication of what we saw with last year's class. So yeah, maybe a little bit, because we always talk about that double A jump is a big one as well. Not that, high A, especially when you're traveling around in West Michigan and Cedar Rapids and Peoria, like it's not the best place in the world to hit. But I do think that it may cause a little bit more pause here. And we know that the Guardians aren't going to be the most aggressive in the world. They also have plenty of guys at those positions. So it's not like they're desperate to add him, tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I do think it could be a little bit more of a build than maybe we were expecting because I think us, just like everybody else, are kind of getting used to the
Right.
quick push. He might just come back though next year, and you know how this guy works.
Right.
How much intel he's gathering. Jeff Ponce, by the way, Baseball America. I know I sent you this piece. Sat down with Travis Bazzana and talked hitting, and Bazzana's philosophy and everything that he got into about hitting, it is phenomenal stuff. And Jeff did a great job writing that up. But it's like everything that I like to feel like I subscribe to, and I love the way that Travis broke it all down. I'm just imagining a guy like him gathering the intel that he's gathering right now. I do
Yeah.
think he's going to come back next year and just be ready to go and could just hit the ground running. But I do think it creates a little bit more of just, hey, let's wait and see. Let's not just push this guy and assume he's going to be starting the year in AAA next year. I think
Yeah.
clearly there's going to be a decent stretch in AA where he's just going to need to show that, hey, I'm ready to go, and he might do that right away. But he's not skipping double, I don't think.
No, essentially, you sent me that article and was like, he just like me, FR. He just like me for real. So, yeah, I mean, I could totally see him, putting his head to the grindstone in December, January, and coming back and being ready to go. And shit, he's the kind of guy that's going to get to the complex on February 1 and just beat everybody
Yeah,
there. And hey, he hits the ground running. Yes or no question before we get into this guy in earnest. Is Charlie Condon a Spokane Indian to start 2025?
he has to be.
Has to be.
He absolutely has to be.
Charlie Condon at this point, 100 professional ABs under his belt, a 33% K rate. This guy's slashing 180, 248, 270. What's up?
Oh, what's up? Finally a good game yesterday. So on Sundays we're recording this, and I'm very happy for him because like it was a really bad stretch there, and I would just love to see Condon, like it doesn't need to be great, but like just finish the year these last few games here just with a couple good ones. Give yourself some momentum going into the off season and just a little bit of positivity because I mean, up until his two-hit day on Sunday, I think he had been 0 for his last 20, maybe 0 for his last 20 something. So it was a very, very rough stretch. Essentially, everything that I was concerned about when we talked swing path, when we talked about the swing mechanics, has been validated in the early going to like the nth degree. And that's not something I want to say. Like I don't want to be right on concerns about players
Right.
like that. And by all, like Condon's an awesome, fun player to watch when you were seeing what he was doing at Georgia. But just from the objective, if my job was on the line and I'm drafting, like I was petrified of this guy. And it's hard because you don't want to rank him too low. It's one of the best seasons that we've seen in college baseball history. So like I found myself just kind of like thinking myself into a circle. Like, okay, I don't want to be too far out there and say, hey, a guy who has clearly produced, it's kind of the Christian Campbell thing, but Campbell's doing
Yeah.
it with Wood and AAA. The
Yeah.
guy that's clearly produced doesn't fit my idea of what a baseball swing needs to look like to succeed. So
He's
I'm
not a
going to make
top
this,
1,000
yeah,
prospect in your
yeah. So
mind.
I'm going to make this about me and drop him way low. But there was a level of like, hey, I definitely am not taking this guy in the top three in this draft. And like, that's why, like, for us, we were the low ones having him at 4. And that even felt weird to me because I'm like, how can someone that productive be that low? But it was
Right.
really the swing mechanics. And look, we see this, right? I mean, we see guys that can just pulverize with metal and then struggle with wood. And it's not just the bat when what the bats are made of. It's also the pitching that you're seeing, but it's a combination of the two. And we talked about like Condon was getting away with more like those inside out swings where just it wasn't a great path to the ball, but
Yeah.
because he's 6'6" and because it's metal, he'd go backside to a homer. But you could just see that path and the way that the ball was being struck, that it would not be a home run with wood. And those have turned into 300-foot flyouts now the other way. But it's the swing mechanics. I sent you an open side look,
Yeah.
and like he's I want to start with this. Super talented. He has God-given abilities that if he makes a swing change, he could go nuclear. He could be fine. He's clearly very, very good when everything is working. But the problem is, like those moves, I just don't think are going to work at the professional level. He starts his hands low, then he drops them lower as he, does his load in his stride. And as the ball's approaching him, he's bringing his hands back up to his slot. So he's still bringing his hands up as the ball's approaching and as his weight's already transferring forward. Like you don't want to have your hands moving upwards as you are supposed to be getting into your slot or already into your slot. So that is one side where you're not creating any hip shoulder separation. Your hands are traveling down, up, and then kind of
And
back down again.
who
And
did we
that makes
talk about with that? Who did we talk about with that? Like the wasted movement
oh
vertically
well
last week.
a big down up down guy was Montgomery as well.
Benny
With
Montgomery. It
Ben,
wasn't Benny Montgomery. We were talking about somebody literally last
oh,
week.
Cam Collier, Cam
Jim
Collier,
Collier. We
and
were
it was a
talking about.
much more
Yeah.
subdued, but he was kind of pumping the hands up and down. That's a good point. It's movement that serves no purpose. But now
Yeah.
imagine it when you're 6'6", and
Right.
your hands are already starting low. You drop them down to almost your belt buckle. And as he's doing that, think about how far his hands have to travel all the way back up. And his hands are going down to the belt buckle as his load. That's when most hitters are pulling their hands back, getting into their slot. He's getting away from his slot. No one can swing from down there. And you've seen guys that can do that hand pump, but you got to do it way early and you got to get back to your slot before you stride. He's getting up as he's already getting forward. And
Yeah.
that's just not a move that's going to work. It's two separate moves that you won't be able to swing until the hands finally get settled in a spot that you can swing from. And for him, then he's now kind of traveling forward. Hands are still going up. And that's why you see that kind of pulling off of it where body's moving forward. You'll see the torso turn and there's just nothing behind him. And that's why we were always talking about with the college video, like it felt like it was in and out of the zone too quick, the barrel, and that he had to either go pull side and catch it out front. And that's why I felt like everything was catching it way out front and going pull side, or you get that inside out swing and it was just purely off of the long levers and bat speed where it would just carry out the other way. But you'd see those balls at those trajectories and say that's not going to work with Woods. So I just don't think that those moves are going to work. Like it seems like it's going to be very difficult to do anything other than catching balls perfectly out front and hoping
Mhm.
that it times up perfectly. And I watched him yank so many foul balls over the last few weeks, just trying to catch it out front, just pulling it towards the third base dugout, because I just think everything has to time up so ideally for it to work. So I'm gonna do a full-fledged breakdown on this.
Yeah.
I'm deciding if I want to do a thread or like write a piece on it, but like about just the swing mechanics and why I think he's a swing change candidate. But he's so talented in terms of just what he can do with his body as a 6'6" guy that I do think that if he makes a change, and it would be a major change. But remember, this is a
Yeah.
guy that redshirted and hasn't had as many at bats as a lot of other hitters. It could go he could go nuclear from there. I just don't trust that change is happening in Colorado. It would have to be a third party situation. And it's just crazy that we're already there. And I know some people may say, like, oh, you're digging too deep into numbers that are a small sample. I was already quite concerned about this as an
Right.
amateur. If you look at top hitting prospects over the last handful of years, I don't think any of them have ever been this bad in high A. And
Right.
again, you can just look at the mechanics, and I'll break it down, and I'll add more to that in the future. But like when your torso is that far gone, when your hands are still traveling upwards, and you're in and out of the zone that quickly, I mean, I think his average contact point on secondary stuff is like legitimately way out in front of the plate.
Mhm.
There's just no, it's too small of a margin to be able to make contact there. And I think it just everything has to kind of link up perfectly. So I'm looking forward to doing more of a specific breakdown. I again don't like tearing down on that
Yeah.
front, but when you're bringing your hand straight up and then you have to go straight back down and you're in and out of the zone that quickly, you almost have no chance against secondary stuff, especially spin. And that's why you're going to see him. And we talked about it with some of the college video against better spin. That's why you'd see him pull off of it, right? It looked like he was swinging right off of it or right over it because his bat is that kind of entering the zone downwards instead of kind of getting on plane early. It just feels like he's never really even getting on plane. And that's already a problem.
Can I give you my comp?
Yes.
Bryce Young. Let me explain it. Bryce Young had undeniable results at Alabama. He won the Heisman Trophy. He had tools around him. He was playing a game that was elevated from the rest of the college game. He had a John Mechie to throw to. He had a Jameson Williams to throw to. He had the best offensive line in the country to work with. He goes to the national championship game. He wins the Heisman with all of that. He has the competitive advantage. He is just better than college defenses. Then you get to a place where the deficiencies are highlighted, and he's in a bad situation right now. I'm not saying the Rockies are a bad situation, but like all those concerns you had in the draft process, like they're showing up now. And you put Bryce Young in a good situation, like chances are he can be really good. This guy has a ton of ability. And a couple changes personnel wise for Young and then swing wise for Condon, these guys can be phenomenal.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
situation right now is validating the minor concerns you had, but you ignored them when they were playing an inferior opponent because they were just so much better and the results were undeniable.
Yeah. No, I think it's a pretty good comparison because you know that in the right situation, and I'm not a football scout by any means, but like guy's shown that he can do it, right? Like, but you don't have confidence that the Panthers are going to help him get to where he needs to go.
Exactly.
It's a similar
Exactly.
thing with Condon, where I'm just concerned of like, okay, well, who's going to get him right, and how much adversity does he need to face before he tries to tinker with that swing? Because I know like there's going to be a level of, dude, I just put up one of the best collegiate seasons we've ever seen, especially
Right.
since we've gone to these crappier bats that have
Let
become
me
much
do
less
me.
crappy. By the way,
Yeah,
they
exactly.
no, I was gonna say they become much less crappy. By the way, and like that's the other side of it, right? We're talking about a season where home runs were at an all time high, and
Yeah.
you have a swing that I think if we had some of the earlier BB core bats, again, he would have performed well, but I don't think it would have been nearly as good. So
Yeah.
because of the path, it's just again, it's all about the path and generating backspin and how where you're striking the ball and how much of a window do you give yourself to be able to make contact. And we talked about it again coming out of the draft, but just way too in and out of the zone, where I just don't think he has much margin for success or contact, where it's either getting yanked foul or he's fouling it off his leg. And he's just hoping that he can catch something out front. And that hand movement with the body coming forward, with the torso having to turn and to feel like he can get the barrel out from getting stuck behind him because it's traveling so much up and down. It just seems like there's going to need to be some significant adjustments made, and that's not even because of the sample. Like I don't want to. It's not if he was hitting 220 or two. Like I still would feel the same way. But again, I thought that maybe this would be a guy that kind of just bucks what I look for in a swing because he's just a freak, and he is.
Yeah.
But there's certain levels of like you just can't get away with a certain degree of things, and I
Right.
think he's kind of pushed past that.
Got you. Let's go to the fourth overall pick here, and Nick Kurtz, who was taken by Oakland out of Wake Forest. First 12 pro games, 38 ABs, 14 knocks. So he slashed 368, 520, 763 with four homers, 13 driven in, and he walked 12 times in 12 games. Hamstring thing has sidelined him, but the first dozen games of Nick Kurtz's pro career could not have gone much better.
He clearly was too good for low A, right?
Right.
Uh, the interesting thing is we're seeing a lot of these guys pulverize, especially that California League, and we're going to talk about James Tibbs and
Hmm.
what Tibbs did in the California League, and then what he's been doing in High A. So that's an interesting wrinkle in this thing. But I mean, Kurt's just the power. I think that's really the power patience combination, and I love like the two P's there, right? Where I mean, if you're gonna hit the ball 113 miles an hour pull side and for a home run, and then you're also not gonna chase, and you're gonna be quite disciplined, things are going to probably end up going pretty well for you through, especially through the minor leagues. But backside shots the other way, like just it seems like his swing. Talk about the opposite. This is a swing that does seem like it gives him a wider margin for success, where he's late on balls, but he catches them deep, and his bad angle at that point, getting on plane so early, he can shoot it the other way for a double. 102 miles an hour, where it looks like it was almost in the catcher's mitt. And then when everything's on time, it's 113 pull side. So saw some really good things. This was a guy that in the video too, I think it really stood out with how comfortable he was against some of the really impressive arms. We talked about, some like 8, 9, 10 pitch battles against high leverage relievers that are throwing 100 and spraying it all over the map and like effectively wild. And he still kind of stayed true to his approach. Was just getting acclimated to double A. He skipped over high A. And then unfortunately goes down with the hammy. I would say the only thing is it's just a hammy, so that's the good news. But we were just talking about like, hey, maybe those injury concerns were overblown, and maybe it was just a couple things that we see so much now with big, powerful hitters, right? The high impact guys. That sometimes you just got to make that adjustment to getting your body a little bit more prepared than you thought you needed to in the past, and maybe that still is the thing with Kurtz, but it doesn't help the case when this is still one large season, especially if we're talking about a professional here, because he's going to be playing 100 plus games. And now he's
Yeah.
had kind of three different ailments this year. So right as I was thinking, okay, maybe we're putting too much stock into this injury stuff, doesn't help me feel better about it, especially when we're saying, hey, maybe this guy could go play a corner outfield if they wanted him to. my focus now would just be let's keep him on the field, especially when you know how good the bat is and how quick the bat can move. So I think the bat clearly, when healthy, he's a dude, that was incredibly impressive. But then, of course, ending on a slight sour note of just, hey, not a serious injury, but here's another ailment
Another.
for a
Yeah.
guy that may have been the one knock on him in the draft.
Luckily, they're ailments and not injuries like a Josh Young. When I think guys that have yet to like fully prove who they can be post draft, it's still a 26-year-old Josh Young because we're
Great
waiting on
point.
this guy to like make it through a full season. But they're ailments for Kurtz. Now, if he has 3 stints on the 15-day IL or the 10-day IL in a given season, like that sucks. You prefer not to see that, especially from a first baseman where value comes from playing every day. Value from Freddie Freeman comes from playing through a fractured middle finger. Value for Matt Olson comes from not missing games. Let's see that from a Nick Kurtz, who, like the odds are stacked against him becoming a Freddie Freeman or a Matt Olson because there's like two of those guys every decade or something. But at the end of the day, like we want this guy to be a top first baseman in Major League Baseball, a top 10 first baseman in Major League
For sure.
Baseball. And you have to be available to be that.
Yeah.
And like the difference between 120 games at first base and 155 at first base is massive. And that could be the difference between a 22 homer season and a 31 homer season.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you which one makes you more money.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned the difference between like the actual like structural issue and like an ailment nagging things that Kurtz has had. It could just be the way that he now prepares himself season like
Mhm.
in the off season and maintains his body. Like there can be things that he'll learn now on the professional side to say, hey, maybe some of the things that I was doing weren't working for me. These are going to be the things that keep my body right and keep
Yeah.
me on the field. Where when you look at a Josh Young, it just seems like sometimes it might be an anatomy thing, it might be some bad luck, a little bit of everything in between. But I'm not gonna fully give Kurtz the injury prone label. I think until we get another one next year, and I'm hoping we don't. But if something
Yeah.
else pops up, next year, then I think you have to start looking at it as a potential concern. I will say this was the most games he's ever played for the most part.
Yeah.
I do know he missed time, so maybe not technically, but it was the longest stretch of baseball he's probably really played besides playing on the Cape and things like that. And obviously, professional, he's a lot more intense and getting the bump up to double. So give him the benefit of the doubt on this one, but it doesn't help quell those concerns.
Do you have any sweeping takeaways on the first 7 2/3 innings from Hagen Smith in his
Uh,
professional?
no, it just seems like it's almost just I almost think he's doing it more for the White Sox than himself, right? Where it's just, hey, why don't you go throw in a game for us? We want to just see your stuff. We want to get it, locked in here on our own systems. We'll have our scouts there, and
Right,
um,
which is weird. Like, why can't you just throw with a Rapsodo at the complex? Like, I'm sure they have Hawkeye and Trackman
or
at Camelback.
Or
Just do
maybe
that.
Hagen seems like a gamer. Maybe he just wants to go out there and play, go out there and pitch. I'm just surprised, Chase Burns not throwing. Smith, they decide, okay, hey, let's get you out there and throw 40 pitches 3 times, and that's what he's done. I don't know what the purpose is. I'm cool with it. I like seeing guys out there, but it is interesting where you're seeing all these other college arms pretty much shut down, and then Hagen Smith's out there going 3 innings, 2 2/3, 2 innings. Like I don't know if it's for the White Sox to gather a little bit more intel. I don't know if it's for him to throw with some guys and just kind of get his feet wet in the organization, or if it's because he actually wanted to throw more. They want him to build up a few more innings. I'm not totally sure, but so far it looks solid. The fastball is running and riding as you'd expect. He's sitting 95 still, and the slider has been darn good. What I'm interested to see is, and we'll talk about it in the White Sox episode coming up is, do they have a similar plan for him that they had with some of their other arms, a la Garrett Crochet? Get a cutter involved there. How do they feel about the changeup and how much do they want him to mix that in? He's only thrown one changeup out of the 116 pitches he's thrown so far as a pro. So clearly he's just not too focused on it right now. But again, he might just be out there throwing, and it just seems like he's just out there getting his feet wet and having a good time and striking guys out still, and got a lot of contact on the ground, which is nice. Combining the swing and miss with contact on the ground is we talk about it all the time is always a good combination.
Yeah, and the crochet thing is working, man. We had this conversation on the Just Baseball show. It was clipped like Crochet got through 7 scoreless innings and he threw one quote unquote non-fastball because he was four seam and cutter. But I made sure to pretty much slam my fist on the table, Brian Kelly style. Like, dude, from that slot, the cutter is a slider effectively. So
Yeah.
if Hagen Smith can tap into that slider and a cutter, so he's kind of got that baby cut, and then he has a little bit more of a sweepy type thing. That's three pitches all of a sudden that you can play with, and that's enough for a guy like this.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I couldn't tell. I just watching the last, and that could be why he's also out there throwing. I couldn't tell if it was intentional or not, but some of those sliders were getting labeled as cutters and were shorter and looked a little bit different, but he's always had that variance to a degree.
Yeah.
So that could be something that he's out there working on too, is manipulating that into more of that shorter cutterish
Making
type
it
of pitch.
intentional variance and not
Mhm.
unintentional variance.
Exactly, because the one interesting thing that I did notice is that if you conflate the pitches that are labeled as cutters and the sliders, which they're still so too similar to, I think confidently separate there.
Yeah,
He's thrown more sliders than fastballs, and that wasn't even something that he was doing in college much. So like that could be a wrinkle in this thing as well. And if he has that in his bag, that's a game changer for sure.
no doubt. Let's go to Jac Caglianone in Kansas City. Caglianone 29 games under his belt as a River Bandit. Caglianone slashing 241, 302, 388, has two homers. He's K'd 26 times in 29 games, walked seven times in 29 games. What jumps out about Cags? The no pitching appearances jumps out to me. I think they know. I think everybody knows that he's going to be a hitter, and that's it. But, um, dude, like, I feel like this is validating a lot of the things that you were pushing pre-draft as well. He's not going to walk. I know he walked a little bit at Florida because nobody was pitching to him in his draft year, but I think we're seeing like the true Caglione hitter profile show up a little bit, and there are some things that need to be ironed out before he gets to the end result.
Yeah, I was gonna say for better and for worse, right? Where this is one where it's like exactly, and it doesn't always happen that way, but exactly kind of how it was imagined, which I would say is a little bit more positive than negative. You knew he was still gonna chase. I was hoping that there might be a concerted effort to cut down on that chase once he got to pro ball, and I was hoping that some of that elevated chase in college was the fact that he wasn't seeing anything to hit. I think there's just a level of he needs to figure out how to get out of swing mode. He just always wants to swing. The flip side is if he was swinging and missing more, which of course always happens
Right.
when you go from college to pro, especially if you're a big guy, then it becomes quite concerning because saying, okay, well, you know that the chase is the biggest challenge, and if the contact rates aren't as good, now he's got a lot to overcome.
Right.
I've always loved the swing in the swing path. It's a little unorthodox in terms of the setup, but if you see like the swing path and what he's able to do, it translates. And that part's been there, right? Like 89% in zone contact rate
Wow.
in those 29 games is absurd for a guy that, in that span is running 90th percentile exit velocity of 109.5 miles per hour. The problem is he's chasing 40% of the time still. And you just can't do that. Like I've watched every at bat he's had so far. And I can't say that about Condon because videos spotted, so like I think I could only watch like 70 of them.
Yeah.
But I've watched just about every single, maybe I missed a couple of Caglione, giving away way too many at bats. Way too many. And I understand that he can do a lot with a little, and we've seen that. I watched him yank a changeup that was, I'm pretty sure, a ball off, and it was 110 into the pull side, right center gap. I've seen him go backside and just pulverize balls. He went backside through the left center gap, 113 miles per hour for a triple. Like you're seeing what the swing can do, and you're seeing like, I mean, he hit one just foul that I think was one of the most. I think I sent it to you. It was one of the most ridiculously powerful swings I've seen. But if he's chasing like this, he's
Yeah.
going to get dismantled in Double A.
Yeah.
Absolutely dismantled. And especially when you know that this is a guy that can really kill you, don't let him kill you then. He's going to get himself out. And
Right.
until he makes that adjustment, I'm so bullish on his abilities,
Yeah.
but that needs to change. It's only 29 games, and another one of those examples where maybe a guy needs to face some adversity before he can make a change. And
Yeah.
this is adversity for Jac Caglianone. 690 OPS is adversity.
Yeah,
especially for his standards. Guy got tossed already on
a
a
couple
strike
times.
three. Is he twice? Is it two ejections
I
now?
think he's gotten tossed twice now.
He's got to get that together too, man. Like there's a few things I think with Cags, like yeah, and I appreciate the fire and the way he goes about his business, but there's conversations going into the draft about the way that he goes about his business, and not helping that by getting tossed in the beginning of your professional career. I just think there's some sides to that, like there needs to be some maturity, I think, in the box, and then maybe as you're walking out of it as well. And I do think those things are going to go hand in hand. I think there's a level of just there's everyone talks about being a professional hitter. You also got to be a professional period, and I think those two things will kind of overlap. But I think in terms of the talent, it's clearly been there. He's hitting the ball so freaking hard, and there's been so many bad swing decisions that it's a ground out. Let's say like and there's a fastball that's below the bottom of the zone, and he hits it 114 miles per hour on two hops to the second baseman. He's going to body that up and throw it over to first. It shows you what he can do. And I love that because that means he can get away with those bad decisions when they happen. Like you're going to make bad swing decisions. Guys do. You see Ohtani, who generally does make good swing decisions. He's fooled, but he crushes a baseball out because he's so freaking talented. You want to use that to your advantage. You don't want to use that as a hedging mechanism for your overwhelmingly bad swing decisions all the time. So that's the thing for me with Cags. But I would say he's right exactly kind of where I thought he would be overall. I would have liked to see a little bit more production, see him hit the ball in the air a little bit more. But I also do think a big part of that is just the fact that he has been so darn aggressive that a lot of the pitches that he's swinging at, are you can't do much with other than put it on the ground.
Yeah, we're going to get to the rest of the top 10 and other performers within the first round in a moment for that quick break. Next guy, I feel like there's a couple more green flags than some of the guys that we've talked about recently. J.J. Wetherholt slid to the St. Louis Cardinals at the end of the top 10, number 7 overall. And J.J. Wetherholt in his first 29 games with Low A, Palm Beach, Low A,
Low A.
295, 405, 400 slash line. Wetherholt has 2 homers. He's driven in 20. He's walked more than he struck out. He looks awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He's at a considerably lower level than everybody else in the top 10.
Seems to be the Cardinals' way a little bit, huh? I mean, Chase Davis, it made sense to be a little bit more conservative with because of the fact that he was a later bloomer in college. You had the swing and miss concerns. It was power over hit. And by the way, we're going to talk about Chase Davis in the next episode, like really performing well. Finally got out of low A and then quickly flew through high A. What it seems like to me is with the complex being right there, with the hitting environment not being too friendly,
Yeah.
I think the Cardinals, what it appears to be, is they'd rather hold you in low A longer, and then even if you are probably ready for high A, keep you there longer, and then when you get to high A, as long as you look comfortable, they'll bump you up quick. And I think that's kind of been the approach. And it hasn't just been the Cardinals. We saw the same thing with Walker Jenkins now. 33
Yeah.
games, I think it was in high A. He gets the bump up quick. Chase Davis, very similar. I'm seeing it with a few others. I think that Florida State League, because of the environment, but also being closer to the complex, I think they just rather have you there and then say, hey, fly through high A then and we'll get you to double, and that'll be the next real big test anyways.
Yeah. I mean, dude, not closer, like on. You get to exist on the complex
Yeah.
like every single day. That's a huge thing, man. Like I know the Pirates, for example, if you've got Pirate City in Bradenton, all those low A guys live at Pirate City. With second round, third round picks, I understand, hey, let's get you to an affiliate, let's see what you got. With your quote unquote prized possessions, whether it is a JJ Wetherhold or a Chase Davis, your first round picks, you probably want to monitor their every waking movement in the first 2-3 months that they are a St. Louis Cardinals employee. And they have the opportunity to do that in Palm Beach when they don't have the opportunity to do that in Peoria. So it's a good way to see that. I also assume that the Cardinals were very hands-on with a Quinn Matthews, which is probably why we saw Quinn Matthews in Palm Beach for that long. So I think it makes a lot of sense, dude. And if I was in a position of assigning guys to certain levels, I think I would skew more towards the Cardinals,
Yeah.
where I get to be super hands-on. I get to be super involved in your day-to-day for your first 2 months. And then, like a baby elephant, I get to release you into the wild after you really find your footing.
Absolutely. And to build on that, how about a guy that also has some injury concerns to quell and has had some repetitive hamstring stuff? being able to get treatment, there and
Yeah.
have your hamstring monitored and just your body and everything taken care of there definitely helps. In terms of evaluating, what he's been able to do, of course, it's a little unfair to compare what he's done to Bazzana. And I would actually probably argue that Bazzana has been more impressive doing what he's doing in high A compared to what you've seen from Wetherholt in low A. Just because we talk about just the quality of stuff and some of the arms that Bazzana's already had a battle against are just different. And
Yeah.
the fact the numbers are within, 50 OPS points, somewhere in that range, I think is a testament to Bazzana handling the aggressive assignments. But, if you're Weatherholt, you can only really perform against what you're put in front of or what's put in front of you. And I think
Yeah.
so far he's checked a lot of the boxes of really duplicating the player that we saw at West Virginia, which is very selective, hits the ball hard consistently, and to all fields. And in these 29 games, 90th percentile exit velocity of 105.5. He's walked more than he struck out. The contact rates have been there. And it just looks like he's a well-rounded hitter. I'd like to see him get it in the air a bit more. And that was something that we have liked a lot about him in the past, is that he can drive it in the air to all fields despite having a swing that seems more geared for line drives. And his hard hit launch angle's fine. It just seems like there's times where he just kind of gets out of it and will roll over a little more than you'd like to see. But overall, I think it looks really good. And I'm excited. I'm going to get a look at him in the low A Florida State League Championship game
Mhm.
2 on Thursday. I'll be going to, so that'll be fun to go check out. But I mean, running a chase rate at 12%, you'll get the swing too. There's been a few shots the other way that just were so impressive, and that's why it's such an aesthetically pleasing swing when you go 104 the other way on a fastball in the outer half. Like
Yeah.
those are the things that just make him such a fun and exciting and projectable hitter. But we've also seen him get on top of, you know, heat at the tip top of the zone and pull it for a 109-mile-an-hour home run to the pull side. So he's showing that he is that guy that we saw at West Virginia, and I think it's important just to stay healthy the rest of the way here. And I think it's been pretty much what you would want to see and what you would want to expect. I'm not going to put too much into the slugging numbers because it's hard for the ball to carry out there. And
Yeah.
again, I think as he gets a little bit more comfortable, we'll start to elevate a bit more. But that's probably the one nitpick I would have.
Gotcha. Let's go to Christian Moore with the LA Angels. And we've talked plenty about Christian Moore. The numbers look awesome. They don't look ethereal anymore. 24 games, 97 ABs, slashing 330, 381, 567 with 11 extra base hits, including 6 homers, 16 driven in 24 games. But this from Angels PR on September 5th, which was Thursday, I want to say. Angels prospect Christian Moore has been evaluated in Birmingham for a left knee injury. It was determined that he suffered a left meniscus injury that will be treated conservatively before ramping up baseball activity. Moore will remain with Rocket City and attempt to work his way back to playing before the regular season ends. So, torn meniscus for Moore.
Is
It
it
sounds
torn? Did
like
they like whatever
I
meniscus
thought
injury means?
Jeff Fletcher said torn.
He had a,
I guess
he quote unquote suffered a setback as well, and it looks like he's not going to play the rest of the year. So weird.
Okay, Sam Blum said it is unclear if he suffered a tear, but he does have a meniscus injury.
Okay,
So there you
whatever that
go.
is, it seems like he's not going to play the rest of this year, which does suck because of the way that he came out swinging, and it was really fun. And we talked about it. Of course, made mincemeat a low A.
Yeah,
And you saw that swing that that swing's going to do damage, and that was the positive here. Is like, okay, he's clearly comfortable getting the ball in the air and doing damage right away as a pro, and not a guy that ends up maybe hitting it hard on the ground too much or whatever. Like 6 homers for 7 games. The challenge then from there was, I think pitchers started to adjust, especially at the Double A level, and he started seeing a lot more fastballs at the top, and then the breaking balls down below off of that, and that's where he started to hit a bit of a wall.
yeah,
Fine. We're talking about a guy that did not seem to be the type that would move quickly,
right.
and he started to. But I think this is one of those players where we talked about just what he did out of the gate, elevated my outlook on him just because you really got to see that power shine through with Wood. But I don't know if he's like fully hedged some of the swing and miss concerns I had. So like it's going to be fun to see a full season next year, and I'm really excited to see him. Hopefully he gets healthy, and there's no reason to rush him back this year. Like just let him get right and have a full
Yeah.
offseason. He had a long year this year, longer than most, and came out guns ablazing. And he only has one speed clearly. So let him get right. But after that hot start, he had a 541 OPS over the final 15 games. I think a 64% contact rate over his pro debut. But 35% ground ball rate, 106 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. I think this is a guy that I probably undersold. Like the adjustment that I'm making here from what I've seen is that he can get into his strengths more than I thought he could. And this is a dude that he's going to K. I think that's clear. He's going to K, but he's gonna slug, and so it's going to be that probably frustrating at times, but also he's gonna get his like, and that's the thing, and that's all you want really from a player of that archetype. If he could walk more, that'll be an interesting thing to monitor. If he can cut down the chase consistently, it's not bad, but like if he can get the chase into the low 20s, then I really like the profile. But it's very clear this is a guy with a 35% ground ball rate in his pro debut, and just the ability to do it to all fields. And we clearly see he's built for the big moment. Like
Yeah.
this is a guy that's going to get into his power, and it might be with plenty of Ks or whatever, but I think he's going to be able to get into it enough.
Yep. We go to Seaver King now, the Wake Forest shortstop slash outfielder that was taken, what, 10th overall by Washington. A couple of guys have been omitted from this because what Chase Burns hasn't thrown, Braden Montgomery's hurt, Connor Griffin is playing in this bridge league, but there's nothing on that. Seaver King is playing pretty well, man. 20 games in low A, slashing 295, 367, 385. No homers yet, three triples, has 10 bags in his first 20 games. He's showing the athleticism that we know is in there. Have you seen enough of the fine-tuned movements of Seaver King in the box to get you like excited?
I mean, you can see what he can be here, and in a draft like this, where we talk about how it's kind of thin on the athleticism and positional value and maybe some of the upside across the board. Like, this is a guy that I think you love to see what you've seen from him in the early going. Of course, the power is not there because I think the the approach has been the problem. And when we talk about chase rates and things like that, outside Cags is in his own realm,
Yeah.
but Seaver King was pretty high in that regard too, and he hedged that with a really solid feel for the barrel. And for how much bat speed that he's able to generate, it's pretty remarkable how much contact he can consistently make. And that's exactly what he's been able to do, even as a pro here, where it's 84% in zone contact. It's a 75% contact rate overall, which is really solid when you're expanding as much as he's expanding. So you're seeing the tools. The game looks a little fast for him at short, but you can see the range and the arm and the ability to potentially play there and be solid there. But I think you have to be encouraged if you're the Nationals here, because this is a very raw player when it comes to college types, right? Where he transferring from Division II really showed well at Wake Forest, but had a bit of a learning curve there, then really showed well, but still didn't have as much of the experience maybe against high level pitching as the other guys did show well on the Cape. But I think what you're seeing from King here is, I think, a great start, and probably somebody that is going to travel a bit more station to station through the minors
Yeah.
than some of these others, than some of the other players, but keeping the K rate down, making enough contact and flashing that impact. I think we've seen it. It's mostly on the ground or low line drives. But the tools galore. I think it's been fun to watch, and again, he might have some big adjustments as he climbs, and that's why I think they'll take their time with him. But considering that he was an underslot guy and where they got him, like I think it's been pretty impressive.
They've got two of them that are going to go station to station in Seaver King and Loma Vida, and they can pretty much travel in lockstep, and that's going to be fun at some point to see them get up. And yeah, it's going to be a slower burn than I think you would typically expect from a college bat in 2024, but it's going to be a fun burn, I feel like, for the Nats. And they might be in no hurry right now with an extended Keibert Ruiz behind the plate, and then with King, where are you going to put him with Abrams at short, and enough there
Mhm.
to kind of spell the absence of Seaver King.
Absolutely. And just one more note. Sorry, I didn't even realize. I want to give him credit. It's a small sample, but we're working with small samples, so a small sample
Yeah.
of a small sample. Last 7 games, he's walked 8 times. And in low A, it's tough because it could just be bad pitching and whatever.
Right.
But in those 7 games, it's only expanded. a few times. Like he's
There you go.
18% chase rate in that stretch. So maybe already kind of showing that shift there. And if that's the case, then I think that's a really positive trend to finish the season on.
Oh, what a difference a level makes for Mr. Tibbs.
Oh,
James Tibbs with the San Francisco Giants. 9 games, 17 hits with Low A San Jose. He hit 415. 17 games with High A Eugene, 9 hits. He's hitting 134. So the batting average dropped about 300 points. The OPS dropped about 500 points. He does have 2 homers in Eugene, but this has been as stark a contrast as I've ever seen. And I know it's a very small sample. We're working with 9 games in Low A, but for a guy to look this good in Low A and then this overmatched in High A is astounding.
yeah, it's pretty wild where you got 41 at bats here both ways. 17 for 41 is in low A, and then 1 for 41 in high A before snapping that stretch. And he's booked much better the last couple. And if you look at the last 9 games, I believe he's eight for, or not, whatever. He's eight for his last 26 with 2 home runs over however
Okay.
many games that is. So that is better. Similar to the Bazzana conversation, but obviously he's not as talented of a hitter. He's very talented, but not
That's
quite.
mean. Yeah.
Uh, like he's not
I'm
as
kidding.
talented as the 1-1 guy. Very talented though. Similar to the Bazzana situation where it's that slow, early building move that is predicated on control of the back hip. Was a big reason why Tibbs was able to have this massive success when he made that shift after his freshman year, where he really struggled at FSU. When you have that, again, better quality spin, it becomes harder and harder to hold that until you get more comfortable recognizing that spin and understanding how it's going to move and how your swing can then play against that. So I think that's what it was with Tibbs, where he crushed low A, starts to see that better spin and struggled to hold it the same way and struggled to stay back. And then even over the last few games, I think you've already started to see him settle in. So it's nice to get that struggle out of the way. Doesn't totally change my outlook on him, I think, one way or another, especially that he's been able to turn it around now a bit more. Of course, if he comes out guns a-blazing and just keeps hitting in high A, feel great about it. But, Cam Smith, who we're about to talk about next, is a guy that we had ranked ahead of him in the draft rankings anyways. So I think this is, I don't know if I would expect this to be that extreme, but
Yeah.
you knew a guy like that, middle of the first round in a lighter draft, also kind of a later bloomer in college, there was going to be some adjustment periods. It was a little bit more dramatic of an adjustment period, but you're already seeing him come out the other side, I think, in these, 9 games that we've been able to see him of late.
What do you have that is new, fresh, or exciting about Cam Smith? Because obviously we've talked about Cam Smith a lot.
A lot.
Myrtle Beach, 15 games and 1175 OPS. He's continued that in South Bend. First 12 games, he's got a homer, 9 driven in, slashing 333, 421, 500 in 48 ABs. This guy has been the performer of the draft class to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And the glove. I would just keep emphasizing the glove, how good that looks.
Cool.
The same story here. I feel like a broken record, but if there's one nitpick since he's got to high A and he's continued to hit there, is all of a sudden sliders look a little bit tougher. The thing with Cam Smith is he's not missing a fastball, and that's how guys are able to get off to these hot starts. I think in professional ball, when you're not missing fastballs, and he legitimately is not missing fastballs. I think what'd you say? It's 27 games so far as a pro.
27 games, yeah.
Yeah, against fastballs, specifically four seamers. Now let's just go both. Let's go four seamer sinkers. He's hitting 413. So he's 19 for 46 against four
Wow.
seamers and sinkers. Like that's just ridiculous. And when you're doing that, also in zone contact rate of 92% against those pitches. So clearly he's feasting on fastballs. When you get to double A, you're going to get spun more and more and more. So that's going to be just the one challenge. And, sliders have been tough for him at points, as it is for clearly any college hitter as they get to high A. But when you pulverize fastballs the way that he does, he hedges, maybe any spin concern with really good swing decisions. He's been able to hit, I think, pitches in all different quadrants. I do think he's going to get much more comfortable against spin because we've seen him be able to do that, the power to all fields. But yeah, like we've been really, really like pumping him up, and we should. but that's maybe the one slight nitpick is just being able to stay on sliders. But he's also doing a lot of this damage against some really impressive pitchers too. And there's a backside homer against Gary Gilhill, who no one's really been going yard against this year
Right.
in the Rays system. That was a really impressive swing, and he just seems to be feeling real good. And I think Smith's a guy that's clearly elevated himself in the eyes of many, even with this pro debut.
There are a lot of really good major league hitters that struggle with sliders. So
Yeah,
if that's like the one nitpick, I think we're going to be okay
especially
with
if you have
Camp.
the good swing decisions and you don't miss fastballs.
Right. If good swing decisions go hand in hand with slight struggles against right on right sliders, I feel really good about your profile as a Major League Baseball player.
Absolutely.
Let's go to Braylon Payne here with the Milwaukee Brewers, who I got a very lofty text about from you. Braylon Payne is 7 for 16 in low A at this point. Shocker of a first round pick. Along with PJ Morlando, this was like the who pick of
I
the
didn't know
first
who he
round.
was.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he started 7 for 16 in his first 4 games, already with a double, a triple, 5 driven in, and 4 stolen bases. He's spraying the board with positives right now, it seems.
Oh my gosh. He turned 18 2 weeks ago, eh,
Nice.
which is wild. So bounce there. I would say bounce back the opposite. He had such a ridiculous start, and then the last game was 4 for 4 with 4 stolen bases and 2 walks, and then back to earth the last game where he's like 0 for 4 with 2 Ks and a walk. But
Whatever.
this guy looks so comfortable already. And I don't know how the Brewers just continue to find these 18-year-olds or 17-year-olds that look like they've been playing baseball at like a professional level for like 5, 6 years. And that's exactly what Braylon Payne looks like, where a little flair, he's busting it out of the box, and he knew he was getting two. He gets two there. You can see the wheels, but then also the swing decisions, like spitting on secondary stuff, really knowing his swing. Like he has a swing that it reminds me a little bit of Joffrey Rodriguez, also in that Brewer system, where it works really well to the top of the zone, and it almost looks like it can be a little too downhill, but they're able to get on plane against stuff that's lower, but it's really easy for them to get on plane against stuff that's elevated. So he does need to probably lay off the elevated stuff. Like I think he feels like he can probably get to it a little bit too easily, and he does. But I think that's where he's run into a little bit of trouble the last couple of games. They've been pushing it even higher, seeing how high he'll go. But I mean, I watched him tomahawk a ball. 104 line shot to center field. And I'm like, okay, this guy's got the barrel control. He's got the approach. He can fly. He looks super comfortable in center. He clearly isn't afraid to go and steal bags already. And the EVs have been there as well. I mean, he's told you the 104 to center, the guy that is speed oriented that just turned 18. I think he pulled another ball, 103. And there's been some impressive EVs. I think he already has 5 or 6 in these handful of games over 100 miles per hour. So this is a guy that I think is going to be a riser and another one of those Brewers prospects that becomes a big name pretty quickly. This is probably one of the names I'm most excited to see more of in this draft class.
Cool. How about Theo Gillen with the Tampa Bay Rays here? Because Gillen at this point has not shown particularly well in his first 8 games. High school outfielder taken by Tampa. First 8 games, he's 4 for 26 with 14 punch outs. He has walked 8 times, but he's sporting a 154 clip, 353 on base. He's just not hitting for power right now. He seemed like a bridge league guy. Like I would have
Mm-hmm.
assumed that he would have been in the bridge league if Rayner and Connor Griffin were not going to make their pro debuts. This felt like a little bit of a head scratcher from Tampa, who is always hyper patient with their prospects, especially the youngins.
Yeah, I think they might have a new philosophy on these high school guys, and you've kind of seen it spill over to the Marlins as well with Peter Bendix, where they've got Carter Johnson playing in low A, and who we unfortunately had to skip over with the 16th pick, PJ Morlando, who took like one swing.
Yeah,
He was ready to go in low A as well. So I think now with the way things are going, certain players they'd rather them just struggle
do it.
in
Yeah.
low A, just go out there, play, with nothing to lose and get that experience. And maybe the Rays aren't big believers in the Bridge League. I don't know. I think that part's interesting. And it's funny that now you're seeing Bendix do a very similar thing with the Marlins draftees. I'm not going to take much from the results. I did want to watch some center field video. He looks very comfortable there.
Cool.
And I think when you look at some of the moves in the box, there's some similarities to like a Johnny Farmello. And I think when you look at the athleticism, there's some similarities to a Johnny Farmello. So I think that's what you're hoping. But I think also is a guy that you're just going to need to wait and see. And
Right.
it's hard to draw anything from a super aggressive push that other teams weren't willing to do with their high school guys that went top 10. So I'm cool with it. Like I like the idea of just if they're mentally ready for it, throw him out there. And he's had 3 hits in his last 2 games, but the speed's clearly there. The patience
Yeah.
has been there, and he looks the part in center. So another guy that I'm just very eager to see more of because I did really like the amateur video I was able to see.
He was probably the most far off player in the first round. It's probably Gillen and Kellen Lindsay. I would assume
I'd say
those were.
Lindsay takes the cake there for sure, but yeah,
Okay.
Gillen's right there as well.
Got you. Let's go to a college guy here, Carson Benge out of Oklahoma State. Benge with the Mets now, and in 15 games with Low A St. Lucie, 273, 420, 436 slash. That's an 856 OPS. He's walked 11 times in his first 15 games, already a pair of homers, 3 doubles, driven in 8, swiped 3 bags. Seems like a well-rounded slate so far for Carson Benge.
One of my favorites. Also, I think coming out of the draft, just thought he was slept on, especially with the fact that he can go play center as well. And yeah, I think similar to the Wetherholt thing, where yeah, he is facing a little bit easier competition, but it's a place where the ball doesn't fly much. And you're seeing Bench, he clearly can just create backspin because he's hitting balls out in the Florida State League here, backside. I think it was only 97 off the bat and it gets out. There was another one that I think was also only 97 off the bat and it gets out. Like he just clearly is able to generate backspin and cause these balls to carry. Contact rates have been above average. The EVs have been solid, and the chase rates have been low. Would like to see him get it in the air more consistently because when he does get it in the air, he clearly backspins it. But I think with the moving parts to his swing, he can get a little bit on the front foot early. I'd like to see him maybe temper some of those loud moves a bit, but he just creates so much whip with the barrel, and you're seeing that shine through already in low A, and he's looked comfortable in center field. I think he's been as advertised so far, and it's been an encouraging, short little stint here.
Cool. Kaelen Culpepper with the Minnesota Twins. Culpepper, the shortstop taken out of Kansas State in the first round. First 9 games in the low A went really well. OPS over 900. 17 games with high A Cedar Rapids. Haven't gone very well. 616 OPS. He was too good for low A. He's beating his match in high A, it seems. Have you been impressed by Culpepper to this point, or are you having some red flags jump out?
I would say kind of status quo, like solid so
Okay.
far. I don't think there's been any major red flags. Making a lot of contact. He's been patient. He's elevating the ball. He's driving it to all fields. I just think there's since he's gotten to high A, just that adjustment in that learning curve, and I think at times just the quality of contact, right, where maybe he's hitting in the air, but maybe some lazier fly balls. It seems like path wise, approach wise, like he's doing what he wants to do. It just seems to be a little bit of that adjustment period to that higher quality spin. I'm excited to dive a little bit more into the defensive video and see,
Yes.
how the glove looks at short. That's something I haven't really had a chance to do too much of yet. And it seems like he has started to settle in more at high A over the last handful of games. But I'd say overall, it's been pretty positive when you look at the contact rates, the approach, and he was able to flash a little bit of that power through a few games earlier and show that he can get into it a little bit to the pull side. So I'd say overall, considering where he was drafted and everything, like
Yeah.
I think it's been a positive.
Now, follow up. Do you see him as a third baseman in the long term?
I hope not because that puts a lot more pressure on the bat power wise. I think
Yeah.
instincts and just hands wise, he has a shot to stick it short. So I do
Cool.
think there's a chance he ends up kind of being that guy that moves around the infield more. But
That could be
I'm
a
I'm
help.
I'm I'm hoping he can stick it short, and I think he can get himself to a point where he does. But I think it's kind of a 50-50 shot.
Got you. Vance Honeycutt. This is a little discouraging. 13 games, hitting a buck 76. Only extra base hit is a double. And in 13 games, 51 ABs, he's K'd 24 times. This, I feel like, is unfortunately validating the swing concerns that you had.
I mean, even are you that surprised that it's been like a big leap for him? Unfortunately, I know.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not. Like, the thing is, you got a guy that's punching in the ACC. He's going to punch in pro ball. And
yeah.
he, what, 8 games in low A, 5 games in high A. And his games in high A, dude, he's 2 for 20 with 11 Ks and no walks. It's just too hard for him right now. This
That's the thing.
offseason is going to be really big.
That's the thing, and we had him, I think, probably lower in the draft rankings in the industry, but still had him as a first round player. And I mentally prepared. I'm like, okay, with the glove being so elite, and the power is always going to be what you're hoping he can get into enough. I figured it's going to be a next year thing. Like when you punch that much in the ACC, like you said, like you're not going to magically find something in pro ball and be able to
Within a month, within
yeah.
2 months. Like by the time you get drafted to signing, it's not like you just cracked the code of professional pitching.
I'd say, oh, yeah, of course, and I think that's a great point of it. The thing is, you'd hope that he got into the power a little bit more.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that's like, you would like to see more than a 196 slug or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I will. I think I'll be very concerned if midway through next year doesn't look any better because this
Okay.
is an organization that has been very good at helping these guys get to where they need to be. And you're even seeing Judd Fabian, who's still going to swing and miss a ton, make that progress and climb up, and now is in AAA. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how this offseason goes. But I figured it was going to be a rough pro debut for Honeycutt.
Gotcha. Cam Caminiti. We talked about him a little bit last week or the week before. Whenever he made his lone start of the year at this point, he threw for Loe Augusta. Shocked that he did that, but three
Yeah.
innings, 3 hits, no runs, no walks, and 4 Ks. Caminiti, I know you raved about that start. Is there anything else that you kind of took away from Cam Caminiti in that start that we might not have hit on initially?
No, no, I think strike throwing was great, right? And if
Yeah.
just if people are stumbling upon this, didn't see
Right.
us talk about it before, 40 pitches, 30 strikes, 3 innings, 1 earned run, 4 Ks, like it just really solid, filled up the zone. It looked kind of as advertised, right? Is that polished lefty that is ahead of his years, despite the fact that he was one of the younger guys and reclassified, and 75% strike rate, and he mixed in 11 sliders and two changeups. Mostly went with the fastball. Don't blame him when you're spotting it and you're throwing 94. Looked really good. And it's a reason why we were shocked that he fell to the Braves there. And I think he's in a great spot for himself to, one, be able to potentially climb quickly. And two, clearly some arms have been trending quite well in that organization over the last couple of years.
No doubt, man. Three more guys, two college catchers, but before that, a high school outfielder. Dante Nori was a surprise first round pick by the Philadelphia Phillies, but he is teammates with Starlene Caba and our guy Eduardo Tait with the Clearwater Threshers. My understanding is a thresher is a type of shark.
Mhm.
Do I have that correct?
It's funny. I know my marine biology. I didn't know if a thresher was a
Do
shark.
you? So I watch a lot of Planet Earth and I love the ocean episodes. And
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure if the Thresher is a shark because I feel like that's the shallow seas episodes. And I don't
Yeah.
watch those. I watch
That's a
deep ocean.
It doesn't sound right to me, but who knows? I'll do some digging. Nori, he's like, he's about to turn 20.
Really?
Pretty, pretty,
I didn't realize he was that old.
he's that old. Yeah, he's like age to
Penile.
level, like checks out. Uh, it's no power right now, but a lot of
Yeah.
contact, not chasing. But I mean, yeah, the EVs have been quite low. For a guy that's got the lower half that he has, and some you expect him to get into a little bit more. But I will say he's held his own. He's been fine, but he is also much older for the level compared to his peers that are playing there. So it's tough to read there, and I wish I had more. But the EVs have been quite low. He's been very patient, and you could see the speed and bat to ball though.
So a thresher, let me read you this definition here. Um, as I pull this up. A thresher is a surface living shark with a long upper lobe to the tail. Threshers often hunt in pairs, lashing the water with their tails to herd fish into a tightly packed shoal. So they are shallow water sharks.
Okay.
Interesting. Probably near Clearwater, Florida.
Yeah.
But we have two college catchers now. Walker Janek is the first guy that we're going to talk about. Janek out of Sam Houston State was the first round pick of the Houston Astros as I pull up his numbers here. Yannick, 25 games, 97 ABs. He's got a 503 OPS, 175, 214, 289. The clip is discouraging, but 4 walks and 97 ABs. Like, it's a little scary, is it
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, he got off to a good start, and then it's just been a little bit rough since then. I think the defense has been pretty solid though, but even then too, like really limited the running game well, and then it's slowed down. I'm glad you mentioned the the walks. He's chasing at a 41% clip so far
Hmm.
as a pro. So it's been rough out of the gate, but catchers, I take all of that with a grain of salt. And I think defensively he has looked pretty solid. So you assume it's going to be a slower burn, and that's always going to be the case with these defensive types of catchers as well. Glove looks good though, and yeah, I just hope the bat comes along.
Last but not least is Malcom Moore, the Stanford Cardinal and the Texas Rangers. Malcom Moore went to High A Hickory. He was a teammate of Sebastian Walcott. He will no longer be a teammate of Sebastian Walcott, who's going to Double A Frisco, according to Kennedy Landry of MLB.com. So we will get to that on tomorrow's show. But 25 games for Malcom Moore, slashing 209, 298, 374. Does have three homers, K'd 29 times in his first 25 games. I don't really have much on him other than when I saw clips, I didn't realize how uncatcher like he looked. Just in the box, I was like, that guy's a catcher. I would have
Yeah.
assumed third baseman, maybe even like middle infielder, to be honest.
Well, unfortunately, he's more of that bat first catcher as well. It doesn't always look entirely catcher like at the plate or behind the plate either. But I think there's been
Yeah.
some focus there and just getting more comfortable, and the blocking has been pretty solid overall. But limiting the running game wise, I think that's been a challenge to a degree in this small stint. But I thought the bats looked pretty good. The question is power, not hit. And even though he's probably swung and missed a little bit more than you would have expected, he also has gotten into a little bit more power than I think you would have expected. So very patient. I think it's kind of status quo. It's kind of what you would have probably expected from him, getting that aggressive assignment as a catcher to high A. And if you look at kind of the offense over the last handful of games, it seems like he's really started to settle in. And like over his last 12, 853 OPS. Starting to seem like he's more comfortable and elevating a little bit more. So bat looks pretty solid, and always has been. Through his collegiate career, it was pretty darn solid. So swing decision's good as well. Big question will just kind of be how does that glove develop, and how much power is going to be in there.
That concludes the first round. We now turn it over to Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum for the second round, right?
Yeah, and we will be doing that probably in a few weeks where we'll check in on all those other guys that plenty of college bats, plenty of other players that we will probably check back in on the end of the season once we have all the biggest performers, both directions, positive, negative, and because that'll be less of a in order thing. That'll be more just who stood out in which
Yeah.
way as we go outside of the first round. But we'll have performers and promotions, quite a few, as we've kind of teased throughout this episode to discuss. And then very excited to talk about the White Sox top prospects as well later this week. If you could help us grow the show, share it with your friends. Let them know about it if they're prospect heads as well, or just want a little bit of an edge in Dynasty, or they're card collectors. Didn't realize how many people that listen to the show are card collectors until I went to the National, which is pretty awesome. Leave a rating, help us grow. It would be awesome. We'd really appreciate that. Subscribe to the YouTube, all that good stuff. As always, thank you for listening. Look forward to talking prospects with you tomorrow.